In the ruins of Graymarsh Bay, a disgraced marine biologist was about to unlock a door that an entire town had prayed would stay sealed. What started as accepting a strange inheritance took a shocking turn when she discovered bioluminescent walls breathing like living tissue and heard something vast pulsing. Beneath her feet, Mira Calloway wasn't your typical desperate heir. For 18 months, she had spent her life rebuilding from professional devastation after exposing illegal experiments. Known for her unwavering commitment to scientific truth over career safety, when she encountered the chained basement door and broke through despite the sheriff's warnings, she had no idea she was awakening something that had been growing in the deep for over a decade. Mira descended into flooded corridors that would lead her face to face with Erebus, a genetically engineered organism that had merged with the mansion's foundation and was reaching toward the open ocean. What began as a chance to start over would become a fight to save both a revolutionary life form and the coastal ecosystem it threatened to consume. The scientific community would never be the same after learning what Dr. Lillian Voss had created in the hidden laboratory beneath the waves. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mira Calloway stared at the mansion through the salt-streaked window of the rental car. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, even though the engine had been off for 10 minutes. The deed sat in the passenger seat, its edges curled from the humidity that seemed to permeate everything in Graymarsh Bay. The mansion looked like something the ocean had tried to swallow, but couldn't quite digest. Grey stone walls rose 3 stories, covered in dark streaks that could have been water damage, or something worse. Broken shutters hung at odd angles. Seaweed clung to the lower walls in thick black tangles, and there was a smell in the air that made Mira's stomach turn. It wasn't just rot. It was something organic and alive, like the house itself was breathing through wounds. She had come here with nothing but a duffel bag and $300 to her name. Her career as a marine biologist had ended spectacularly 18 months ago, when she'd blown the whistle on her research director's illegal experiments. The academic world had closed ranks. No one would hire her. Her apartment lease had expired. Her phone had stopped ringing with anything except collection agencies. Then the lawyer's letter arrived, informing her that a distant relative she'd never heard of had left her property in a coastal town she'd never visited. It had seemed like fate, or desperation wearing fate's mask. Now, looking at the mansion, Mira wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The town behind her was quiet in that unnatural way that follows disasters. Boarded windows lined the main street. Half the businesses displayed faded, closed until further notice signs. The hurricane had struck 6 weeks ago, and Graymarsh Bay still looked like it was waiting for permission to heal. Mira forced herself out of the car. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face as she approached the mansion's front entrance. The wooden door hung slightly ajar, swollen with moisture. She pushed it open and the hinges screamed. Inside, the air was thick and damp. Her footsteps echoed on warped floorboards. Furniture sat under moldy sheets like sleeping ghosts. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing plaster underneath that looked diseased. Everything was covered in a thin film of salt, but it was the light that unsettled her most. Even in the fading afternoon sun, there were patches of the walls that seemed to glow faintly, a sickly blue-green phosphorescence that had no obvious source. Mira had seen bioluminescent algae before, but never inland. Never clinging to stone and wood like this. She walked through the main hall, her scientific training kicking in despite her unease. The water damage patterns were wrong. The staining didn't follow gravity the way it should. It spiraled upward in some places, as if the water had defied physics. In one corner, the floorboards were warped into something that looked almost like a wave frozen in wood. A sound stopped her, faint, rhythmic, like breathing, but deeper. It seemed to come from beneath her feet. Mira knelt and pressed her ear to the floor. The sound was there, unmistakable now. A slow pulse, rising and falling. She stood quickly, her heart hammering. You shouldn't be here. Mira spun around. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the dying sun. He was tall and solid, wearing a sheriff's uniform that had seen better days. His face was weathered, lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes. He looked like someone who hadn't slept well in a very long time. "This is my property," Mira said, finding her voice. "I have the deed." The man stepped inside, his boots leaving wet prints on the floor. "Captain Ross Talley, town sheriff. And I know who you are, Miss Calloway. Got word you were coming." He looked around the room with an expression Mira couldn't quite read. Disgust mixed with something else. Fear, maybe. "Deed or no deed, this place isn't safe. The lower floors are flooded. The structure's unsound. You should find somewhere else to stay." "I don't have anywhere else," Mira said, more honestly than she'd intended. Ross studied her for a long moment. "The boarding house on Main Street takes monthly renters. Mrs. Chen's rates are reasonable. I can't afford reasonable." Mira crossed her arms. "Why does everyone in this town seem to know about me? I only arrived an hour ago. Small town. Word travels." Ross walked to one of the draped windows and looked out at the darkening bay. "That, and people have been waiting for someone to claim this place. Been abandoned since before the storm." "Before?" "The lawyer said my relative died during the hurricane." "Your relative died 3 years before the hurricane." "Natural causes. This place has been empty ever since." Ross turned to face her. "Nobody in town would touch it." "There are stories." "What kind of stories?" Ross's jaw tightened. "The kind that make people board up their windows at night. The kind that make fishermen avoid this stretch of coastline even when the catch is good." He moved toward the hallway, stopping in front of a door Mira hadn't noticed before. It was reinforced with metal brackets and a heavy chain wrapped around the handle, secured with a rusted padlock. "Especially people stay away from the lower floors." Mira approached the door. The chain was old, the rust thick in places, but the lock itself looked newer. The metal shone where hands had gripped it. "Someone's been maintaining this." "That door stays closed." Ross's voice had an edge now. "I'm not asking, Miss Calloway. I'm telling you. Whatever's down there, it needs to stay down there." "What's down there?" "Nothing you need to concern yourself with." Ross headed for the front door, then paused. "My brother disappeared near this property 2 years ago. We never found his body. The Coast Guard said he was probably swept out to sea, but I know different. He was investigating something about this place, something about the original owners." Mira felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp air. "What happened to the original owners?" "They vanished, right before the hurricane hit. The whole family just gone. Some people say they evacuated and never came back. Others say they're still here." Ross met her eyes. "Still here, just not alive." He left without another word, his footsteps echoing through the empty mansion until the front door closed with a heavy thud. Mira stood alone in the growing darkness. The faint glow on the walls seemed brighter now, pulsing almost imperceptibly, and beneath her feet that rhythmic sound continued, like breathing, like something vast and patient, waiting in the depths. She approached the chained door and ran her fingers along the metal brackets. They were bolted deep into the stone frame. Someone had wanted this door to stay closed, but they'd also oiled the chain recently. The lock, despite its rust camouflage, had been opened and closed many times, which meant someone was still going down there. Mira pressed her ear to the door. The breathing sound was louder here, and there was something else. A faint sloshing like water moving in a confined space. The smell of the sea was overwhelming, mixed with something chemical and sharp. She tried the lock, knowing it wouldn't open, but her fingers found something else. Scratches in the wood around the lock. Fresh scratches, not made by keys but by something else. Something with edges that weren't quite straight. As the last light faded from the windows, Mira made her decision. She would find a crowbar. She would open that door, and she would discover what everyone in Graymarsh Bay was so desperate to keep hidden. Behind her, in the darkness of the mansion, the walls pulsed with their eerie light, and deep below, something stirred in response to her presence, as if the house itself knew she had arrived. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She'd found a room on the second floor that seemed relatively dry and had dragged a mattress from under one of the sheets. But every time she closed her eyes, she heard that breathing sound. It seemed to echo through the walls, coming from everywhere and nowhere. She'd also found something else. In the room's closet, hidden behind a false panel, was a leather-bound ledger. The pages were water-stained but legible. Most of it was mundane, lists of supplies and maintenance records. But the final entry, dated 3 days before the hurricane, was written in a shaking hand. We sealed it before the waves took us. God forgive us for what we built. God forgive us for what we're leaving behind. The entry was signed with initials Mira didn't recognize. But below that, in different handwriting, was a single word that made her blood run cold. Pelagic. Mira sat up, her mind racing. Pelagic meant ocean. Deep ocean. Why would someone use that word in a mansion ledger? Unless the mansion was connected to something beneath it. Something underwater. She grabbed her flashlight and made her way downstairs. The chain door seemed to pull at her in the darkness, but she wasn't ready to break through it yet, not without understanding what she might unleash. Instead, she searched the ground floor systematically. In what had once been a library, she found more clues. Water damage here was severe, but it had revealed something underneath the ruined books. Technical diagrams, blueprints. They showed the mansion's foundation, but they also showed something else. Tunnels, a network of passages leading down into the bedrock, down to chambers that extended far beneath the coastal shelf. This wasn't just a house. It was built on top of something. Something designed to be hidden. A crash from somewhere below made Mira drop the blueprints. It sounded like metal scraping against stone. Then silence. Then that breathing sound again, louder now, almost urgent. Mira's scientific curiosity warred with her survival instinct. She knew she should leave. Call Ross, get help. But she'd spent her entire career being told to stay quiet, to not ask questions, to accept the official version of events. It had cost her everything. She wasn't going to make that mistake again. As she stood in the dark library, surrounded by the ruins of someone else's secrets, Mira Calloway made a promise to herself. She would uncover the truth about this mansion. She would find out what happened to the original owners, to Ross's brother, to whatever lay beneath the flooded lower floors, even if it destroyed her. Even if it destroyed everything, the mansion seemed to sense her decision. The walls pulsed with their bioluminescent glow, brighter now, almost welcoming. And from the depths below, something answered. A sound that might have been machinery, or might have been something alive, recognizing that after years of waiting, someone had finally come home. Morning came grey and wet. Mira woke to the sound of rain hammering against broken windows. She'd fallen asleep on the library floor. The blueprints spread around her like accusations. Her neck ached, and her mouth tasted like salt. She gathered the diagrams and carried them to the kitchen, where she'd set up a makeshift workspace on a table that had somehow survived the flooding intact. In the daylight, such as it was, she could see more details. The underground chambers were extensive. Too extensive for a private residence. This had been a facility of some kind, disguised as a coastal estate, but what kind of facility? And why hide it? Mira pulled out her laptop, praying the battery would hold. No internet, of course. The storm had taken out most of the infrastructure, but she had downloaded files before leaving her old life behind. Research papers, archived news articles, anything related to coastal marine biology that might give her work again someday. She searched for pelagic research and found nothing. Pelagic program yielded no results. But when she tried bioadaptation, something pinged. A news article from 15 years ago, barely 3 paragraphs long, buried in the back pages of a scientific journal. Government initiative aims to restore coral reefs through genetic innovation. The article was vague, mentioning only that a private-public partnership had been awarded funding to develop new approaches to marine ecosystem restoration. One name appeared in the list of researchers, Dr. Lillian Voss, Director of Adaptive Marine Biology. Mira felt her pulse quicken. She knew that name. Voss had been a legend in her field. a pioneer in genetic modification of marine organisms. But she'd disappeared from the scientific community over a decade ago. Most people assumed she'd died or retired. Mira had written a paper in graduate school citing Voss's early work on coral regeneration. If Voss had been involved with this property, that explained the secrecy. It also explained why Mira might have been chosen to inherit it. Her mother had worked in marine biology too, before Mira was born. Before something had made her leave the field and never speak of it again. Was this all connected? Had her mother known Voss? Had she worked here? The questions multiplied faster than Mira could process them. She needed to get into that basement. She needed to see what was down there. She spent the morning searching for tools. In a shed behind the mansion, she found what she needed. A crowbar, bolt cutters, a waterproof flashlight that still worked. The shed itself was strange. It was newer than the rest of the property, and inside, beneath a tarp, she found diving equipment. Tanks that had been serviced recently. A wetsuit in her approximate size. Someone had been preparing for this. Someone had known she would come. By noon, Mira stood in front of the chain door with her tools. The breathing sound was louder today, almost agitated. The bioluminescent patches on the walls pulsed in rhythm with it. She positioned the bolt cutters on the chain. The metal was thicker than she'd expected. It took 3 tries before the chain snapped. The sound echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door swung open on its own, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Water gleamed on the steps, and that chemical smell hit her like a wall. But there was something else too, a smell like ozone, like electricity in the air before a storm. Mira clicked on her flashlight and started down. The stairs were reinforced concrete, industrial rather than residential. They spiraled down for what felt like 3 full stories. The walls were smooth, almost organic in their curves, and everywhere that faint glow clung to the surfaces. When Mira touched it, her fingers came away, tingling. At the bottom of the stairs was a corridor. The water here was ankle-deep and cold. The walls were marked with stenciled labels. Containment A, observation deck, sample storage. This had been a research facility. A hidden one, built beneath the mansion like a parasite beneath skin. Mira waded forward, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Doors lined the corridor, most of them sealed with the same heavy locks. But one door stood open, swinging slightly in some invisible current. She approached it carefully. Inside was what had once been a control room. Monitors lined the walls, most of them dead. But one flickered with emergency power, showing a looping feed of the corridor she'd just walked through. She was on camera. Someone might be watching. Mira found a logbook on a desk that had somehow stayed dry. The pages were filled with technical jargon, measurements, dates going back 20 years. But certain phrases jumped out at her. Accelerated growth rate, unexpected tissue fusion, Subject 7 showing signs of independent cognition, Subject 7. Whatever they'd been studying here, they'd been testing it on something living. She turned to leave the control room and nearly screamed. A man stood in the doorway, silent as death. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in a waterproof coat that had seen decades of wear. His face was hard, carved from driftwood and bad memories. In his hands he held not a weapon, but a lantern, its light casting shadows that moved wrong. "You opened the door," he said. His voice sounded like he'd swallowed gravel. "I've been watching, waiting to see if you would. Who are you?" Mira's hand tightened on her flashlight, ready to use it as a club, if necessary. Elias Drummond. "I keep the lighthouse." He gestured vaguely upward. "And I keep watch over this place. Have for 12 years now. Watch over what?" Elias stepped aside, and Mira saw what lay beyond the control room. Another corridor, but this one was different. The walls were no longer concrete. They were covered in something that looked like coral, but moved, breathed, pulsed with that eerie bioluminescent light. "The containment chamber," Elias said, "where they kept it. Where it's been growing ever since the storm broke the seals." He turned to Mira, and his eyes held something between pity and warning. You woke it. The minute you broke that chain upstairs, you sent vibrations through the whole structure. It knows you're here now. It knows someone new has come. Mira's scientific training fought against the fear rising in her throat. What are you talking about? What did they create down here? Elias's expression darkened. The end of the world. Or the beginning of a new one. Dr. Voss wasn't sure which. She's still not sure, even now. Voss is dead. The record said, the records lied. Elias raised his lantern, illuminating the corridor ahead. And there, in the depths of the flooded passage, Mira saw something move. Something vast and sinuous, covered in bioluminescent patterns that formed shapes almost like language.
She's down here.
She's been down here since the hurricane, and she's still working, still experimenting, still trying to prove she was right. The thing in the water moved closer. Mira could see now that it wasn't a creature in the traditional sense. It was a structure, a living architecture of coral and tissue and something else. Something that had incorporated the metal beams and concrete of the facility into its own body. What is it? Mira whispered. They called it Erebus, Elias said. It was supposed to regenerate damaged coral reefs, fix what humanity had broken. But it did more than that. It evolved. It learned, and when the hurricane hit and flooded this place, it escaped into the foundation. Now it's part of the mansion, part of the cliff, part of the bay itself. He looked at Mira with eyes that had seen too much. And it's still growing. Every tide brings it new material. Every storm makes it stronger. Mira felt the world tilt beneath her feet. This was beyond anything she'd imagined. This was beyond anything science had prepared her for. But as she stared at the living structure before her, the marine biologist in her saw something the frightened human wanted to deny. It was beautiful, terrible and beautiful. A new form of life, neither plant nor animal nor machine, but something unprecedented, something that could change everything. We have to destroy it, Elias said, reading her expression. Before it spreads, before Voss finishes what she started. There's a failsafe, deep in the lower chambers. I can flood the whole system, seal it forever. But I need your help. He grabbed her arm. And we need to do it before the next storm hits. Because if Erebus gets loose in the open ocean, there won't be any stopping it. Mira pulled away from his grip. Her mind raced through possibilities, through scientific protocols, through the ethics that had destroyed her career once before. Show me everything. I need to see it all before I make any decisions. I need to understand what we're really dealing with. Understanding is what got us into this mess, Elias said bitterly. But he gestured for her to follow. Come on, I'll show you what's left of Voss's research. I'll show you what happens when ambition drowns morality. And then maybe you'll understand why some doors should stay closed. They waded deeper into the facility, into passages where the walls breathed and the water glowed with unnatural life. Behind them, the thing called Erebus stirred, its bioluminescent patterns shifting into new configurations. As if it were watching, as if it were learning from their presence, and somewhere in the flooded depths below, Dr. Lillian Voss sat in her submerged laboratory, monitoring screens that showed every movement, listening to microphones that carried every word. A smile crossed her weathered face. After all these years, someone with the right mind had finally arrived. Someone who could understand. Someone who could continue the work. Someone with the right genetic markers to be the next phase of the experiment. Mira surfaced from the mansion's depths well after dark, her clothes soaked and her mind reeling. Elias had shown her everything. The containment chambers where Erebus had first been cultivated. The observation rooms where researchers had watched it grow, merge, evolve. The emergency protocols that had failed when the hurricane struck. And worst of all, the evidence that suggested this had been intentional. That Voss had wanted the storm to come, had been waiting for it. But Mira needed more than Elias's word. She needed documentation, records, something that would make sense of this nightmare in the language she understood. Data. She drove to the boarding house Tally had mentioned, needing a shower and a bed that didn't smell like seawater and decay. Mrs. Chen, the proprietor, was a thin woman in her 70s who looked at Mira with eyes that held too much knowledge. "The mansion," Mrs. Chen said as she handed over a key. "It wasn't a question. Yes, you'll want the room at the end of the hall. Windows face away from the water. Some guests prefer not to see it." Mrs. Chen's fingers lingered on the key. "Your mother stayed here once." "Long time ago, before you were born. She worked at the estate for 6 months, then left in the middle of the night. Never said goodbye. Just left a note saying she was sorry." Mira's hand froze on the key. "My mother? You knew her?" Everyone knew everyone back then. Small town, smaller community. The estate employed 15 people. They all left the same way eventually, scared, changed. Mrs. Chen's expression hardened. Some came back different. Some didn't come back at all. What was she working on? Questions like that are why the others left. Mrs. Chen turned away, heading toward her private rooms. "Breakfast is at 7. Keep your curtains closed at night. The light from the bay has been strange since the storm." In her room, Mira stood under a scalding shower until her skin turned red. She needed to think, needed to process. Her mother had worked here, had been part of whatever Voss had created. That meant Mira's inheritance wasn't coincidence. It was a summons. A trap or a test or something worse. She needed help. Someone who knew the town's history. Someone who might have records that the official channels had buried. The next morning, Mira found her answer in a coffee shop that barely stayed upright. A flyer on the bulletin board advertised a podcast. Tidal Secrets, Coastal Legends and Forgotten Histories. The host's name was Nora Pennington, and she was doing a live recording that evening at the town library. Mira attended. The library was a converted church, its pews replaced with bookshelves that leaned at concerning angles. About 20 people sat scattered among the stacks, most of them elderly. At the front, a young woman in her late 20s set up recording, equipment with the enthusiasm of someone who still believed the truth mattered. Nora. Pennington had bright eyes and a smile that seemed genuine, despite the dreary setting. She wore a rain jacket covered in pins from various marine conservation groups. When she spoke, her voice carried the cadence of someone who'd grown up hearing stories and learned to love them. "Tonight's episode is about the mansion on Cliff Road," Nora announced. "Some of you might remember when it was still called the Pelagic Institute, before it became a private residence. Before it became a ruin." She glanced around the room. "Before it became something we don't talk about." Several people stood and left. The rest shifted uncomfortably. Nora continued anyway. "I've been researching the property for 3 years. The official records say it was a marine research facility from 1995 to 2010, studying coral restoration. But the more I dig, the more I find evidence of something else. Something that involved genetic modification. Something that the government shut down, but never quite explained why." Mira listened from the back row, her heart pounding. After the recording ended, she approached Nora as the others filed out in silence. "I inherited that mansion," Mira said, without preamble. "I need to know what really happened there." Nora's eyes went wide. "You're Calloway, Dr. Calloway's daughter." She grabbed Mira's arm. "I've been trying to find you for 2 years. Do you have any idea what your mother was involved in? Do you know what they created?" "Some of it, but I need documentation. I need proof." Nora grinned, and it was the expression of someone who'd been waiting for permission to speak. "I've got boxes. Files I've copied from municipal records before they could be destroyed. Interview recordings from people who worked there before they stopped talking. And I've got something else. Satellite imagery from the night of the hurricane. Images that show something in the water. Something big coming from beneath the mansion." They went back to Nora's apartment, a cramped space above a nautical supply shop. The walls were covered in maps, printouts, photographs, connected by red string, like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Except it wasn't a dream. It was methodical, careful research. Nora pulled out boxes labeled with dates and names. The Pelagic Institute was officially a coral restoration project funded by a Defense Department grant. But the real money came from private sources, pharmaceutical companies, biotech firms, people interested in regenerative medicine and adaptive biology. She spread out documents on her table. Dr. Voss was the director, but there were 15 core researchers. Your mother, Dr. Mira Calloway, was the lead geneticist. Mira's hands trembled as she picked up a photograph. Her mother, young and smiling, standing in front of the mansion with a team of scientists. She looked proud, excited, nothing like the haunted woman who'd raised Mira to never ask questions about the past. What happened to them? Mira asked. Most left around 2008, no explanation. They scattered across the country, changed fields, went silent. 3 died in accidents within 2 years. 2 disappeared completely. Nora pulled out another file. But here's where it gets interesting. The project didn't shut down in 2010. It just went underground, literally. Building permits show extensive excavation in 2011, construction of storm reinforcement structures. But the schematics don't match standard foundations. They show chambers, airlocks, containment systems. They were preparing for something to escape. Mira realized, or preparing to keep working in secret. Nora opened her laptop and pulled up satellite images. This is the mansion the day before the hurricane. The image showed a normal, if isolated, coastal property. And this is 3 days after. The second image made Mira's breath catch. The mansion was there, damaged but standing. But the water around it glowed. Massive patches of bioluminescence spread from the foundation, reaching into the bay like veins. And at the center, beneath the mansion, something showed up on infrared, as a heat signature too large to be explained by any known marine life. What am I looking at? Mira whispered. I don't know, but it's been growing. Every month, the affected area expands. Nora zoomed in on more recent images. The bioluminescent patterns had spread along the entire coastline. The fishing's been weird. Catches are down, but the few fish they find are mutated. Extra fins, unusual coloring. One boat pulled up something that wasn't in any identification guide. She pulled out a photograph that made Mira's stomach turn. The creature in the image was vaguely fish-like, but its body was covered in what looked like coral growths. Its eyes were too intelligent. Its mouth contained structures that resembled both teeth and filter-feeding apparatus. It was a hybrid, an impossible combination of species and structures. Erebus, Mira said. Erebus? Nora looked up from the photograph. You've seen it. I've seen what it's become. Mira sat down heavily, the weight of the last 2 days pressing on her shoulders. The lighthouse keeper, Elias Drummond, he's been guarding it, watching it grow. He says Dr. Voss is still alive down there. That's impossible. Voss was declared dead after the hurricane. So were 3 other researchers who supposedly evacuated. But no bodies were ever found. Mira met Nora's eyes. I need to see the rest of the facility. There's an access tunnel marked on the blueprints, leading from the cliffs directly into the lower chambers. If Voss is really alive, that's how she's been getting in and out. Nora was already grabbing her camera equipment. The tide's low in 3 hours. If we're going to do this, that's our window. They drove to the cliffs south of the mansion as twilight turned the bay purple and gold. The access point was hidden behind fallen rocks, marked on Nora's map with coordinates she'd extrapolated from old surveyor documents. They climbed down carefully, the stones slick with spray and moss. The tunnel entrance was sealed with a rusted grate, but someone had cut through the bottom corner. Recently, the metal edges were bright where they'd been severed. Someone's been using this, Nora whispered, filming everything. This is active. They squeezed through and found themselves in a passage carved from living rock. The walls here showed the same bioluminescent growth, but denser, older. It looked less like an infection and more like intentional cultivation. The patterns formed shapes that were almost decorative, almost purposeful. The tunnel sloped downward, following what must have been a natural fissure in the cliff face. Water trickled along channels cut into the floor, flowing deeper into the earth. The air smelled like a tide pool, that mixture of salt and life and decay. After 20 minutes of careful walking, the tunnel opened into a chamber that took Mira's breath away. It was enormous, cathedral-sized, with walls that pulsed with light like a living heartbeat. But it was what filled the chamber that made her stop. Tanks, dozens of them, floor to ceiling, filled with specimens that shouldn't exist. Hybrid creatures suspended in preservation fluid. Some were clearly failed experiments, malformed things that had never lived. Others were pristine, beautiful in their strangeness. Fish with coral skeletons, octopi with crystalline skin, something that might have been a sea turtle, but had developed structures that looked disturbingly human. "Sweet mercy," Nora breathed, her camera forgotten in her hands. This is a genetic library. She was creating an entire ecosystem. Mira moved between the tanks, her scientific training cataloging what she saw, even as her horror grew. Each specimen was labeled with dates, genetic markers, success rates. The progression was clear. Voss had been perfecting her techniques, learning how to merge marine DNA, how to create stable hybrids, how to push the boundaries of what nature allowed. And the dates on the most recent tanks were from this year. This month. Last week. She's still working, Mira said. Even now, she's still experimenting. A sound made them both freeze, footsteps splashing through water. Coming from deeper in the facility, they ducked behind a cluster of tanks as a figure emerged from a side passage. It was a woman, tall and gaunt, dressed in a wetsuit that had been patched so many times it looked like scales. Her hair was white and wild, pulled back from a face that might have been beautiful once but was now carved by obsession and isolation. Dr. Lillian. Voss, alive, moving with the confidence of someone in her own domain. She walked to one of the tanks and made notes on a waterproof tablet, humming something that might have been music or might have been madness. Then she spoke, though no one else was visible. Subject 23 is responding well to the neural integration. The coral matrix has successfully bonded with the nervous tissue. We should see cognitive function within another week. She paused, listening to something Mira couldn't hear. Yes, I know we're running out of time. The storm will be here in 5 days. But that's exactly why we need to accelerate the timeline. When Erebus merges with the open ocean, we need the secondary subjects ready to spread. Mira felt Nora's hand grip her arm. The implications were clear. This wasn't just about one organism. Voss was planning to seed the ocean with multiple hybrid species, to fundamentally change the marine ecosystem and our new arrival. Voss continued, a smile crossing her face. Dr. Calloway's daughter. She's exactly what we hoped for. The genetic markers are perfect. When she's ready, she'll be the proof we need. The bridge between the old world and the new. Mira's blood turned to ice. Voss knew she was here, had known she would come. This entire inheritance had been a trap designed to bring her to this place, to make her part of the experiment. Voss turned suddenly, looking directly at their hiding place. You can come out now, Mira. I know you're listening. I've known since you broke the seal on the upper door. Erebus can feel every vibration in this facility, every heartbeat, every breath. Her smile widened. Welcome home! Mira and Nora ran. They sprinted back through the tunnel, their flashlights bouncing wildly off the walls. Behind them they could hear Voss calling, her voice echoing strangely, as if the walls themselves were carrying it. You can't leave, Mira. You're part of this now. You were always meant to be part of this. The tunnel shook. Not an earthquake, but something else. Something moving through the rock itself. The bioluminescent patterns on the walls pulsed faster, brighter, and Mira realized they weren't just decoration. They were sensors, nerves. Erebus had grown through the entire cliff structure, and now it knew they were trying to escape. A section of tunnel collapsed behind them, cutting off their retreat. They scrambled forward, reaching the entrance just as another tremor sent rocks tumbling down the cliff face. They squeezed through the grate and climbed, not looking back, not stopping until they reached Nora's car. As they sped away from the cliffs, Mira looked back. The mansion sat dark against the evening sky. But beneath it, through the foundation and deep into the earth, she could see veins of blue-green light pulsing like arteries. The entire cliff was infected. The entire bay might already be compromised, and they had 5 days before the storm arrived. They went to the lighthouse. It was the only place Mira could think of that might be safe, and Elias was the only person who might have answers. He was waiting for them when they arrived, as if he'd known they would come. "You went down there," he said. "Not a question. You saw her." "She's insane," Nora said, still shaking. "She's planning to release those things into the ocean. She thinks she's saving the world. She thinks she's evolving it." Elias poured them coffee from a pot that looked older than the lighthouse itself. "Sit down. If you're going to understand this, you need to hear the whole story." They sat at a table scarred with decades of use. Through the windows, they could see the bay, calm now, beautiful in the moonlight. It was hard to believe that beneath that peaceful surface, something terrible was growing. Elias began to speak. "I was hired as security in 2007. The Pelagic Institute needed someone who could keep secrets and handle trouble. I was ex-military, good with my hands, better at keeping my mouth shut. For the first year, everything seemed legitimate. They were doing coral restoration research, or so I thought. The scientists were excited, hopeful. They believed they were saving the reefs." He paused, his hands tight around his coffee mug. "Then they created Erebus. It was supposed to be simple. A genetically modified organism that could regenerate damaged coral faster than nature could destroy it. They used DNA from multiple species, coral obviously, but also from creatures that could adapt to pollution, temperature changes, acidity. They wanted to create something resilient, something that could survive what we'd done to the oceans. But it evolved," Mira said. "It exceeded every expectation. Within months, it wasn't just regenerating coral. It was incorporating other materials, metal from the tanks, plastic from equipment. It was learning, adapting, becoming something they hadn't designed." Elias's voice dropped, and it was growing fast, too fast. By 2009, they realized they couldn't control it. Some scientists wanted to destroy it. Your mother was one of them. Mira felt tears sting her eyes. Her mother had tried to stop this, had failed, had fled, but Voss refused. She said Erebus was the next stage of evolution, that humanity had poisoned the oceans, and now the oceans were creating something that could survive us. She convinced the remaining team to keep working, to see how far it could go. And when the funding dried up, when the government shut them down, she went underground. Literally, she had them build the containment facility beneath the mansion, hiding the project from the world. "What happened during the hurricane?" Nora asked. Elias's face darkened. "I was given orders to seal the facility if there was any breach, to use the fail-safe system that would flood the lower chambers and entomb everything inside. But when the storm hit, Voss locked herself in. She sealed the doors from the inside. She wanted the flood. She'd been waiting for it, because she knew that if Erebus was exposed to the open ocean through the natural fissures in the rock, it would spread. It would escape. And you let it happen," Mira said, understanding flooding through her. "I tried to stop it. I went down into the facility as the water rose, trying to reach the manual override. But Voss had destroyed it, and 3 other security personnel who tried to help me. They didn't make it out." His voice broke. "I was the only one who survived. So I stayed. I've been watching, waiting for someone to come who could finish what I couldn't. Someone who could destroy Erebus before it spreads completely." He stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a metal case. Inside was a device that looked like a combination of remote control and detonator. "This is the backup failsafe. It will trigger explosive charges placed throughout the lower chambers. The blast will collapse the passages, and a chemical agent will be released that should neutralize Erebus at the cellular level. But there's a problem." He looked at Mira. "It has to be activated from inside the main containment chamber. Someone has to go down there and set it off manually, and they probably won't make it out." The room fell silent except for the sound of waves against the rocks below. "There's another problem," Elias continued. "If we trigger this, the collapse will destabilize the entire cliff. The mansion will fall into the sea. And the chemical agent, if it reaches the bay in high concentration, could kill everything in these waters for years. The town's fishing industry, the ecosystem, Everything would die, so our choice is to let Voss release her hybrids into the ocean, or destroy the bay trying to stop her, Nora said. Unless there's a third option, Mira said slowly. What if we could reach Voss? What if we could convince her to stop? Elias laughed, a bitter sound. I've tried. For 12 years. I've left messages, tried to reason with her during the few times she's surfaced. She's beyond reason. She believes she's doing the right thing, that humanity's time is over and something new needs to begin. Mira stood and walked to the window, looking out at the bay. The water glowed faintly, those bioluminescent patterns spreading like a slow-motion explosion. Somewhere beneath the surface, Erebus was growing, and in 5 days a storm would come. The town would have to evacuate. The facility would flood completely. And Voss's plan would succeed. Then we stop her before the storm arrives, Mira said. We go back down there. We document everything. We bring proof to the authorities, the Coast Guard, the EPA, whoever will listen. And we force them to contain this properly. Not with explosives and poison, but with science, with quarantine protocols and research. You want to save it? Elias said, understanding dawning in his eyes. You don't want to destroy Erebus. You want to study it. Mira turned to face him. If we destroy it, we learn nothing. Voss's research, her entire genetic library, it would all be lost. But if we can contain it, control it, we might learn something that could actually help the oceans. We might salvage something good from this nightmare, or we might give Voss exactly what she wants, Elias said. Another chance to prove her theories right. Maybe, Mira admitted. But I'm not ready to commit genocide against a new form of life, just because it scares us. Not without trying every other option first. Nora looked between them. So what's the plan? Mira's jaw set with determination. We go back into the facility. We find Voss's research logs, her genetic data, everything. We make copies and send them to every marine biology institution in the country. And then we give Voss a choice, surrender and be part of a legitimate scientific study, or we expose her and let the government handle it their way. She'll never surrender, Elias said. Then at least we'll have tried. Mira picked up the failsafe device. And if she refuses, if there's no other way, then we use this. But that's the last resort, not the first option. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was coming early. They had less time than they thought. The next morning, the sky was the color of old bruises. The National Weather Service had upgraded their predictions. The hurricane would make landfall in 3 days, not 5. It was stronger than expected, following almost the exact path of the previous storm. As if it were being called, Mira stood on the beach near the mansion, watching the waves. They were wrong. The patterns weren't natural. Currents moved in spirals that defied the wind direction, and in the deeper water she could see shadows moving, shapes too large and too organized to be fish. It's already spreading, Ross Talley said behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. The fishermen are reporting it. Nets coming up empty or full of things they can't identify. And the water temperature's been rising. 2 degrees in the last week. Erebus is generating heat, Mira realized. The metabolic process, all that growth, it's warming the surrounding water. I don't care what it's doing. I care that it's here and a storm is coming and I have to evacuate 2,000 people who don't have anywhere to go. Ross's frustration was evident. I need answers, Dr. Calloway, real ones. What are we dealing with? What's going to happen when that storm hits? Mira took a breath. There's a research facility beneath the mansion. It was conducting genetic experiments on marine life, creating hybrid organisms designed to restore damaged ecosystems. One of those organisms escaped during the last hurricane. It's been growing since then, spreading through the bay. And the scientist who created it is still alive, still working, and planning to use this storm to release more hybrids into the ocean. Ross stared at her. You're telling me we have some kind of sea monster under the town and a mad scientist controlling it? I'm telling you we have an unprecedented biological entity that doesn't follow conventional rules, and a researcher who believes she's saving the world by letting it spread. Mira pulled out her phone and showed him the photos Nora had taken. This is real, Ross, and we have 3 days to stop it. He looked at the images, his face going pale. Show me. I need to see this myself. They went to the mansion together, along with Nora and Elias. The building looked worse in the stormlight, as if the approaching weather was already beginning to tear it apart. But the bioluminescent growth was brighter, pulsing faster, excited by the atmospheric pressure changes. In the flooded corridors below, they showed Ross everything. The tanks, the specimens, the evidence of Voss's continued work. He walked through it all in silence, his hand resting on his sidearm, as if it could protect him from what he was seeing. "This is beyond my jurisdiction," he finally said. "This is federal. Military, maybe? We need to call in the Coast Guard, the National Guard. We need to lock this place down." "That's exactly what we should do," Mira agreed. "But it has to be done carefully. If they just come in with explosives and try to destroy everything, the fallout could be worse than the problem." As if in response to her words, the facility shuddered. Not a natural tremor, but something purposeful. The lights along the walls brightened, and through the water they could see movement. Something large was approaching. "We need to leave," Elias said urgently. "Now!" They retreated up the stairs, but the mansion's front door slammed shut before they could reach it. The bioluminescent growth had spread into the upper floors, covering the walls and ceiling. And through it, a voice echoed, distorted and strange, as if speaking through water and stone simultaneously. "I told you, Mira, you can't leave. None of you can. You're part of the experiment now." Voss stepped out of a side room, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, something moved in the shadows. Something that had once been human, but had been transformed by exposure to Erebus's genetic material. Its skin was translucent, showing coral-like structures beneath. Its eyes glowed with that same bioluminescent light. "Meet Subject 17, Voss said proudly. "The first successful human integration. He was one of my research assistants, volunteered to be transformed. And now he's part of something greater than humanity could ever be alone." Ross drew his weapon. "Don't move! Bullets won't stop evolution, Captain." Voss smiled, serene and terrible. "In 3 days, the storm will come. The facility will flood completely, and Erebus will spread into the open ocean, taking root in coral reefs across the world. Within a generation, the oceans will be healed. Humanity will have to adapt or die. Either way, the planet wins." "You're insane," Nora breathed. "I'm visionary." Voss turned to Mira. "Your mother understood at the end. That's why she ran. Not because she disagreed, but because she knew she didn't have the strength to see it through. But you do, Mira. I've read your work. I know about how you tried to expose unethical research. You have the courage to do what's right, even when the world calls you wrong. What I did was try to protect people from dangerous science," Mira said. "Not enable it. Then you were limiting yourself. Science isn't just about protecting the present. It's about creating the future." Voss gestured to the glowing walls around them. "This is the future, beautiful, alien, alive in ways we never imagined. And you can be part of it." The creature behind her moved forward, and Mira saw its face clearly. Saw the intelligence in those glowing eyes. Saw the horror of what it had become. "No," Mira said. "We're leaving. And we're bringing help, real help. Scientists who will study Erebus properly. Contain it. Learn from it without becoming it." Voss's expression hardened. "Then you'll die trying." She raised her hand and the mansion responded. The bioluminescent growth surged toward them like living tentacles. Ross fired, the gunshots deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullets did nothing. The growth absorbed them, incorporated them, grew stronger. Elias threw the failsafe device to Mira. "Run, get to the lighthouse." "I'll hold them here." "Elias, no, go!" They ran as the mansion collapsed around them, the structure finally surrendering to the organism that had consumed it from within. Behind them they could hear Voss laughing, triumphant and mad. And beneath everything, that rhythmic pulse grew louder, faster, as if a vast heart was beginning to wake. They reached the lighthouse as rain began hammering the coast. Mira clutched the failsafe device, her mind racing. Behind them, the mansion pulsed with bioluminescent light, its stone walls breathing like living tissue. Her phone buzzed impossibly. A message from an unknown number. "Come back, Mira, come to the heart. Your mother made the wrong choice. Don't repeat her mistake. Voss was using the old facility networks, reaching out through dead systems. I have to go back," Mira said quietly. Ross grabbed her arm. "That's suicide. She wants to talk to me. That's my opening." Mira held up the device. "If I can reach the containment chamber, I can end this." She gathered diving equipment and her mother's research journal. Ross handed her his radio. "Channel 7. When you trigger that device, run for the cliffs. We'll have a boat waiting." Mira walked back into the storm. The mansion had transformed completely. Walls covered in coral and living tissue pulsed rhythmically. She descended into the flooded facility, following patterns of light that seemed to guide her deeper. The containment chamber was vast and cathedral-like. At its center, Erebus had grown beyond imagination, part coral reef, part machine, part something entirely new. Its translucent structure branched upward, reaching toward the storm. Beautiful and terrible. "You see it now?" Voss emerged from the shadows, her skin showing bioluminescent patches where the organism had begun merging with her. "The future. Everything the oceans need to survive. You can't control how it evolves," Mira called back. "You're playing God with systems you don't understand. Your mother said the same thing." She was wrong. Mira threw her mother's journal to Voss. "Read the last entry." Voss caught it, her expression changing as she read. The entry warned that Erebus's growth was not self-limiting. Without proper constraints, it would consume everything, healthy ecosystems and all, until nothing remained but itself. "She tried to warn you," Mira said, "that Erebus needed limits. But you didn't listen." Voss looked at the massive structure around them, and for the first time, doubt flickered in her transformed eyes. "What have I done?" Water surged into the containment chamber as another wave crashed against the cliff. Erebus responded, its growth accelerating, reaching toward fresh seawater. "Help me stop it," Mira said urgently. Voss shook her head. "The failsafe requires manual detonation. Someone has to stay and trigger it at the right moment." She pulled out a small device. "But Erebus has incorporated human neural tissue. If someone interfaces with it first, they can send a dormancy signal instead of killing it all at once. That would prevent the toxins from decomposing colonies, poisoning these waters for decades." She pressed the neural interface into Mira's hand. "Your mother's genetic code is in here. Connect with Erebus. Tell it to sleep. Give humanity time to respond properly." Mira pressed the device to her forearm. Pain lanced through her as filaments connected to her nervous system. She reached out and touched Erebus's central mass. The sensation overwhelmed her. She felt every branch, every cell, every hybrid creature in the bay. Erebus didn't want to destroy. It wanted to grow, to fulfill its purpose. But it had no understanding of limits. "Sleep," Mira commanded through the connection. "Rest, wait, dream until someone can show you the right path." Slowly, the organism stilled. Its pulsing slowed. Throughout the bay, hybrid creatures settled into suspended animation. The bioluminescent glow dimmed. "It worked," Voss said wonderfully. "Now go, get to the surface. I'll trigger the failsafe and seal this chamber permanently. Voss, this is my responsibility. Tell them what happened. Make sure my research is studied, not destroyed. Promise me." Mira ran as the explosion came, collapsing the corridor behind her. She climbed through falling debris, burst onto the crumbling cliff, and jumped into the storm. Ross's boat caught her as the mansion collapsed completely, sliding into the bay in a cascade of stone and dying light. Beneath the waves, Erebus slept, sealed in its rocky tomb. The storm passed. Graymarsh Bay survived. Mira spent days in the hospital, then faced investigations from countless federal agencies. She told them everything, showed them the evidence, explained the need for careful study rather than destruction. Some listened. When proposals came to excavate the facility, they included protocols for scientific analysis. The bay grew quiet. The bioluminescent glow faded. Life found its rhythm again, but Mira knew Erebus wasn't dead. It was sleeping, waiting beneath rock and water. She turned down research positions at major institutions and bought a house in Graymarsh Bay instead. She would stay. She would watch. 1 month later, a diver found a small, glowing coral colony near the collapsed cliff. When scientists took samples, they found Erebus's cells, dormant but viable. Mira stood on the beach, watching research vessels anchor offshore. She touched the scar on her arm where the neural interface had connected her to the organism. She could still feel it sometimes, a whisper in her dreams. The tide was coming in. With it came questions that would take decades to answer. What had humanity created? What was sleeping in the deep? Mira would find those answers. She would learn to guide what had been created, or learn to destroy it properly before it woke. Either way, she would be ready. The tide always returned. And beneath everything, something slept and dreamed of the day it would rise again. 6 weeks after the storm, the water receded enough to reveal new growth across the shore. Intricate coral formations glowed faintly in the shallows, beautiful and alive. At dawn, a figure emerged from the surf near the ruins. Mira, seemingly unharmed, but with faint bioluminescent veins visible beneath her skin. She carried Voss's data core. She delivered it to Ross and Nora. We need to learn from it, not repeat it. That night, Elias appeared at the lighthouse door, changed but breathing. It let us go, he said quietly. When you told it to sleep, it released us. Mira walked the beach alone, watching patterns pulse beneath the waves like a heartbeat. She whispered to the tide, maybe the sea doesn't destroy. Maybe it remembers. In the deep, Erebus dreamed of balance, of harmony, of a world where humanity and nature could coexist. And it waited, patient as the ocean itself, for the day when Mira would return to guide its awakening. The mansion was gone, but its legacy remained, written in light beneath the waves. A promise that the tide and the truth would always return. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.